This story begins more than 100 years ago in Brooklyn when Catherine McCabe and William Craft met and fell in love. Not long after, Julie Torgensen fell in love with Hartwick Mathisen. Brooklyn was a very different place then compared to the modern urban center it is now. Both couples married, Katie and Willie, in this Catholic church in 1910. The church is in Red Hook, a few blocks from the Brooklyn waterfront. The building recently underwent an extensive renovation. It's comforting to know couples still get married at the same altar more than a century later. We don't have a record of when or where Julie and Hartwick married, but it might have been at the Bethany Lutheran Church in Brooklyn, where we know they worshiped. Nanny and Pop moved to 764 55th Street sometime in the Roaring '20s. Their sixth of seven children, Bernadette, was born in the front bedroom. This house could be considered our ancestral home. 4 generations of our family lived here from the 1920s into the 21st century. After marrying, Julie and Hartwick lived at 277 6th Street in the Park Slope section of Brooklyn. Their second of 2 sons, Harold, was born in the ground floor hallway. Julie was on her way to the midwife. She didn't make it in time. The family moved to 1032 75th Street, Bay Ridge in the late 1920s before the Depression set in. After Hartwick died of pneumonia, Julie worked as a seamstress and school matron to support her family and keep her house. 3 generations of Mathisens lived in this home.
I spent a lot of time with her, and she was this very nice, good friend of mine who was this fat lady who walked very poorly but could still get around. And she'd tell me stories about the olden days. She was very nice and easy to get along with until something happened. And then, like if she was having an argument, if Pop didn't do something or Rita didn't do something, she would scream, "Wait!" And she'd leap out of the chair. Her whole body would leap up out of the chair and then fall back in. And she would scream and everybody would go, oh, all right, mother. All right, mother. And then, you know, she had a bad temper and she'd get her way. He was a very good husband. From everything I ever heard, he'd go to work, he'd get home, he'd bathe the kids, and they'd eat supper, and he'd help her put them to bed. I mean, they just kept having babies. There's obvious, you know, what was going on with them. And she apparently either really, you know, did her marital duty or really enjoyed him. And that's great. I mean, that's super duper. And of course, in those days, you didn't admit enjoying your husband. And a lot of Irish women were taught that it was an onerous duty that you had to do. But they really liked one another. She had a rectangular wooden box, which was the money, the house money. And as soon as I was allowed to go out by myself down to the corner, which was when I was 5, it was before I went to school, she'd say, go and take 10 cents. Or later she'd go and take a quarter and get us some candy bars. And I'd go around the corner and get as many candy bars, and they were a nickel in those days, and we'd gobble them up. One day her father, I don't know this story, so, came into the school and was looking for his girls. And he came by Katie, our grandmother's room, and he saw the teacher hit her hand with a ruler. And because there was a little dirt in her pinky nail, she told me this story. And he said, how dare you hit my girls? And took them all out of Catholic school. Now, that's a story she told me. They, you know, he went to church and he did the sacraments all the time. But basically, he wasn't like a gossip. and he just wanted you to keep your end up. He was very good, and he was very good to us kids. He took me out every Sunday almost, when I was real little. I remember walking far ways with him, holding his hand, or taking the bus very often. We went to the 69th Street ferry. Do you remember that ferry? It was a nickel ferry, and we'd go over to Staten Island and back. Pop was good, and he was good to the kids. He liked the kids a lot. I mean, they liked it. That was family. That's what they were interested in. And when the children started to come, they were very happy. You know, the story of Pop's family coming from Europe, having lost, I don't know, 2, 3, or 4 children very early in their lives. They just died, got sick and died. And heartbroken, they said they threw up everything and came to the United States, to Red Hook, and there they raised, 4 or 5 children. And so I guess that story was in Pop's mind from very early in his life. And I mean, they had 7 children. I know they came from a place called Baden, and I believe it was in northern Austria, because they told us Baden, and I'm thinking Baden-Baden, Wiesbaden, but it was Baden. Her mother was an Indian, and her father was a big, brawny Irish cop, like with the blonde, I think like my father, blue eyes and blonde hair. In those days, Lord, you couldn't be anything but white. It was just, I remember Aunt Elvira, who raised those girls. If you'd seen her, you wouldn't doubt it, I assure you. And she told me it. And one of us should definitively get our DNA done and find out for sure, because she told me that from when I was a little child.
Who's she?
Nanny, our nanny. So, you know, I was her pal. I believed her because I was a little kid and she was my grandmother, and she told me that. And I knew Aunt Elvira, who was somebody who said words like shit and ass, and nobody else did that. And she had a monkey. I mean, give me a break. Nice Irish. Nanny was dark. She had dark hair, hazel eyes, and well, I never saw her, I rarely saw her outdoors, so. Anyway, Eastern Indians were never very dark. They were from Shinnecock. And I once asked, there were these Indians performing someplace, and I told him the name was Griff, because she told me their name was Griff. And he said, that's a very old name in Shinnecock.